If you don't know what's on your network, how it's connected, and how traffic flows, how can you make any possible claim of your overall security? Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to this week's episode of Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. Eric Cole. This is always one of my favorite times of the week where we just get to sit here by the fire. There is no fire, but pretend, and we get to talk, and we're not together, but pretend, right? I pretend like I'm sitting with a bunch of my friends and colleagues around a nice fire, and we're just having a fireside chat about my favorite topic, cybersecurity. So once again, if you are new, welcome. I'm glad to have you. And if you're a frequent listener, thank you so much for trusting me with 30 minutes of your time to share my knowledge on cybersecurity. What I'd like to talk about today is really a key role of a CISO is understanding what you actually have in place at an organization. To me, one of the biggest problems I face today is whenever there's an issue, the solution of most organizations is buy more tech, right? Buy more tech. And I was recently on a podcast, international guy, and we started arguing because he's like, Eric, the solution is technology. There's all this great technology out there and there's all this great tech. And if companies just purchased all this technology, all the problems would be solved. I'm like, really? I said, what's the difference between technology, a product, and a solution? I said, do you agree they're different? And he goes, yes. I said, well, what's the difference? Well, solutions have integrated processes and people to make them work. I said, yes. I said, and what's one of the biggest issues that organizations have? They don't have enough people. And then he started getting it. He's like, oh, I see where you're going. If you just keep buying more technology and you don't have the people for handling it, you're actually making the problem worse. Because let me explain. The reason why companies get broken into is because their technology is generating this many alerts and they only have enough staff to access those. So if you're generating 20,000 alerts a day and your team can only handle 200, you can see how quickly you're going to fall behind. So going in and buying more technology is not the solution. In many cases, it makes it worse because now your team has to learn and understand and support even more technology. So now we're taking their valuable time and spreading it even thinner. The real issue is if you have technology that's generating 20,000 alerts and you only have 200, that means you don't really understand what technology is in place and it's not tuned correctly. So the close second reason why organizations are getting compromised and not detecting the attacks is because of way too many false positives. Vendors want to say they're catching products, they're catching attacks. And I see this all the time where after a major breach, a vendor will step forward and say, we caught the attack. We checked our cloud-based system, and sure enough, on that day for that client, our technology caught the attack. If they would have just listened or used our technology better, they could have prevented this. And I'm sitting there going, somebody needs to coach them on business skills because throwing your customer under the bus is not a good thing, right? I'm like, that's not going to go in. I'll tell you right now, any vendor that does that, I would never recommend their product to any of my clients. Because essentially, and I know they probably weren't intentionally doing it, they were trying to promote their tech, but you're basically creating a gigantic liability for that customer. Not only did they get compromised and not detected for a significant period of time, but now one of their vendors is saying that we caught it and they ignored it. Right? That's not good evidence, especially publicly. So I was just sort of shaking my head on that. But then I got even more concerned because when I looked at this specific vendor's technology. Yes, they caught the attack, but their product was overtuned and they were up to about a 55% false positive. So their idea was, if in doubt, let's alert on it. So yes, we're alerting on a lot of normal traffic. We're alerting on a lot of noise that you have to deal with, Mr. or Mrs. Customer. But at the end of the day, we can say we caught it. Right? That, to me, is a dangerous, dangerous proposition. But we're seeing that not all. Please, if you're a vendor, I love vendors, and 90% of vendors are amazing, awesome, and the most ethical people on the planet. Most vendors I work with go above and beyond, and I am just so impressed and honored to work with them and call them partners. So please don't read into this that I'm saying all. The problem is, even if it's 5 or 10%, and those are the ones that are over-promoting, overselling, and over-promising, those are the ones that are hurting a lot of customers. That's who I'm referring to. So if you're in that small percentage of not nice, unethical vendors that overtune and throw their customers under the bus, yeah, I'm talking to you. Everyone else, you're cool. We're good. We're good. Don't worry. Don't worry. We're in good shape, right? I always like to caveat that because I'm amazed where I'll say something, and if I'm not very careful in couching it, even though I don't say every vendor or every person, people read it that way and they get upset with me. So I'm just pointing out the inevitable. This is what happens. So what we need to do as a CISO is we need to step back before we buy any technology. And we need to understand, what do we actually have? How effective is it? And where are the gaps within our technology? We want to strategically figure out what we need and make smart, educated purposes based on risks to the organization, not reactionary measures. Normally, when a lot of companies buy tech, it's after there's a problem or an issue or a breach, and the solution is, here's some money, go fix it, go fix it, go fix it. That's not what we want. So here is a CISO exercise that you need to do. First, you must get from IT and or security and or both an accurate, up-to-date network diagram. Now, I know initially when I say that, for some people in some organizations, I'll get pushback. And they'll be like, Eric, there's no way we could, our network is so complicated. There's so much, there's no way, no possible way we can have an accurate, up-to-date network diagram. My response to you is, that is your highest priority. Because I'll just make it real simple. If you don't know what's on your network, how it's connected, and how traffic flows, how can you make any possible claim of your overall security? You could have firewalls and IDSs, but they might not be connected. You might have systems in front of it and might not be sitting in the right segments that they're supposed to. So I would argue that if you don't have an accurate, up-to-date network diagram, you have no clue on your security. You have no clue on your IT. Yeah, it works, right? People get email, people surf the web, and maybe once in a while, your devices will block traffic, but that does not mean it is set up correctly. If you don't have visibility into your environment, if you don't understand how all the pieces are interconnected together, how in the world can you make any claim of whether you are secure or not? So to me, that's one of those foundational things. Even if it takes a couple of weeks, even if it takes a lot of resources, the only way a chief information security officer can be successful is if they have proper visibility into the network. So you must push really, really hard to have an accurate, up-to-date network diagram. Then, once you get that accurate, up-to-date network diagram, I want you to get a couple of colored pens or pencils. And yes, you can use crayons if you want, right? I love my 4-colored pen, right? I don't leave home without it. I buy them in bulk, right? Because they are just awesome. So get some 4-colored pens and sit down with your team. And here's the first thing I want you to do. You're going to do multiple passes on this accurate, up-to-date network diagram. First, I want you to go through, and for each one of your security devices, I want you to go in and write the overall effectiveness of that device. For example, for firewalls, it could be drop packets. For a network intrusion detection system, it could be true positives and false positives. For an intrusion prevention systems, it can be blocked traffic. For phishing, it can be number of phished individuals that reported it. But the point is this: how do you know if your technology is working if you don't have an effectiveness measure? Do you realize any technology on the planet isn't going to work if it's not designed and configured correctly? If it's not placed correctly on the network and configured properly, it's not going to work. And this is the problem we run into in a lot of organizations: checkbox security. Do you have a firewall? Check. Do you have an IDS? Check. Do you encrypt traffic? Check. Do you have endpoint security? Check. What's the issue? It doesn't mean it's configured or working correctly. Right? Just because you have a firewall, it could have 255 rules that collaboratively equal any allow. It's not doing anything on the network. So if you're not going in and looking at those measures and looking at effectiveness, how in the world can you make any potential claim of whether it's working or not? So that's the first thing. You need to know, are these devices effective? Are they working? And you need to come up with metrics for every one of your devices. That's first. Then we need to follow one of our fundamental rules. Prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. Preventive devices by nature cannot catch all attacks. Simple math. Simple math here. Preventive devices must have 0 false positives. A false positive is when you're going in and blocking on legitimate traffic. If you have a preventive device like a firewall and it's blocking legitimate traffic, it is hurting the business. What is one of the golden rules of cybersecurity? If security negatively impacts the business, security is wrong. So we need to go in and make sure that never happens. I'll tell you right now, the quickest way to get any tech off your network is to block normal traffic. If you're blocking customer traffic, internal traffic, or valid communication, that is not acceptable. So that means that your firewalls must have 0 false positive. It cannot block legitimate traffic. Now remember, false positives and false negatives are inverse. A false negative is when you're ignoring attacks. You're viewing attacks as normal traffic. You're viewing attacks as normal communication over the network. So watch what happens. Inverse. So if our preventive devices have to have a 0 false positive, that means they have to have a high false negative, which means by nature, they're going to be missing a large number of attacks. So preventive devices are good. It's good. You should prevent what you can. But preventive devices can only block things that are 100% bad 100% of the time. So the problem with most organizations that CISOs need to understand at a strategic level is if you put all your energy and effort in prevention, it's going to guarantee 2 things. 1, you're going to get compromised. And 2, you're not going to know about it. So we need to put a lot more energy and effort into detection. Now, take out another colored pen after you do the effectiveness of each device. And now I want you to go through with your team, and every device that's preventive, put a P. And every device that's detective, put a D. And add them up. If you're like most clients that I start working with, 90% or more of all their devices are preventive, and less than 10% are detective. That is the beginning of the problem. If you're putting all your energy in preventive measures, and preventive measures can only block things that are 100% bad 100% of the time, and you know it's going to miss things, then, and you don't have enough detection, this explains very clearly why organizations spend millions of dollars on security. They have 20 to 30 people on their security team, and they get compromised for 3 years and don't detect it because they're so focused on prevention, they're missing the detection. A good CISO recognizes you're going to get compromised. A good CISO, and it's going to sound crazy, a good CISO, if you go 3 months without any compromises of your network, a good CISO gets nervous. After 6 months, they're very, very anxious. And after 9 months, they know they have a problem. Because I'll tell you right now, there is no organization on the planet that is functioning with internet communication that does not have compromises on a regular basis. So if you're going 9 months and you haven't detected any attacks, no attacks at all, it means one of two things. Either you're not looking in the right spot, or you have unicorn grade security. Right? You got Bubbles the unicorn coming into work, sprinkling magic pixie dust on your servers and making them secure. Don't go with that option. Right? Trust me, you're not looking in the right spot. And to me, this is probably one of the big challenges. We still have this mentality that if you don't have any attacks or any breaches, you are this amazing CISO, and it's completely backwards. It's completely backwards. The CISO that has attacks that they're detecting in a timely manner and controlling, that is a world-class CISO. Because the probability that your organization goes a year or two without any attacks at all is probably not correct. It's that you're not catching it. And I see this. I shouldn't say recently, it was now 10 months ago. It felt recently before the COVID hit. And I was actually traveling and doing live keynotes and interfacing with people and high fives and all that fun stuff that we can't do anymore for at least the short term or foreseeable future. So this was back in January. And I did a keynote over in Saudi Arabia. And if you ever fly from Saudi Arabia back to the US, all the flights are at 1 or 2 in the morning. That's just how it is. So you spend the day there. So I finished at about 2 o'clock. And they said, why don't you stick around for some of the other presentations? So there was a panel discussion. And they're doing this panel discussion, and they're like, okay, can each panelist introduce themselves? So I remember the first panelist gets up and introduces himself and says, and I'm so proud. My organization has not had a single attack, a single successful attack in over 2 years. He's like, and it's almost like, yeah. And everyone's like, woo. And then the next CISO gets up and introduces. And you could see he was a little timid. And after he does the introduction, he's like, and my organization, we typically have about 1 to 2 attacks a quarter. And we've had 3 attacks in the last 12 months. And then you could see him like down, and it's almost like people, boo, and they want to, and I'm like, and I'll be honest with you, I'm watching this from the back, and I'm just looking, I'm like, is this really happening? I'm like, picture this. This is like what geeks dream about, right? This is a really bad dream. This is a nightmare. And I'm just watching this play out, and I'm just thinking to myself, this is the most galactically stupidest thing I've ever seen. It's insane. The person who said they've had no attacks at all for 2 years, I personally would fire for malpractice. And the one that had 1 or 2 a quarter and detects them within 24 to 36 hours and controls the damage, that's world class. That is a world class CISO. So for some reason, we need to change this mindset that breaches and attacks are bad. I mean, it's part of life. I mean, if you have a viable company that's growing and making a lot of money, you're going to be targeted, right? You need to recognize that, and we need to put measures in place to increase our detection, or at least have enough detection that we're confident it's not happening. Because just to finish the story, when they were asked questions, the CISO that said they had no attacks over the last 2 years also said that 97% of everything they do is prevention, because they believe they can stop all attacks from coming into the organization. Once again, crazy, right? I feel like we should play Crazy Train. Right? It's crazy. I mean, it's nuts. We need to go in and put more energy and effort in detection. Now, people always ask, Eric, what's the right number? Not a perfect number, but the way I look at it is you've invested so much time, energy, and effort that right now in your network, it's probably 90% prevention, 10% detection. So to me, over the next couple of years to fix it, and once again, I'd have to look at your organization, but just guessing of what I see in other clients, I would probably almost do like a 60% detection, 40% for future investments, maybe even 70-30 just to get it back. Because ideally, you sort of want around a 50-50. Never going to be that perfect, but you want to be able to have a high level of confidence in your prevention to block what you can, and a high level of detection to catch what you can't. Now, here's the real problem. I'm going to give you the really secret sauce. This is the good stuff. Not that I haven't given you good stuff. This is the awesome stuff, because everything else was good. So here it is. If I want to catch and block attacks from coming in, what do I focus on? Inbound, right? Inbound traffic. Because if somebody's trying to break in or cause damage, I'm going to catch them on inbound. So inbound prevention makes a lot of sense. We want to block them inbound. Question though, if I want to catch data exfiltration, if I want to catch information leaving the organization, if I want to catch a command and control channel, where do I need to look? Outbound. So the magic to make this work is inbound detection and outbound prevention. Total backwards. Inbound prevention, outbound detection. Right? That's the magic. You prevent on the inbound and you detect on the outbound. That's the magic. Now here's where we really see the problem. Get a new colored marker, and all your security that's inbound focused, put an I. And all your security that's outbound focused, put an O. And if you're like most of our clients, 95% of all your security is going to be inbound with less than 5% outbound. That's the problem. So many companies are trying to prevent, and the little detection they're doing, they're trying to also detect on inbound traffic. Inbound traffic is way too noisy. It's way too noisy to try to catch an attack. However, outbound traffic is much easier and cleaner. So what we really want when we talk about defense in depth and having multiple levels of protection, we're really talking about equally spreading our security across multiple devices and doing inbound prevention and outbound detection. Now, one other exercise, because a lot of people, when we say defense in depth, they're thinking quantity, not quality. They're going to go in and say, well, we have 7 different devices. We have defense in depth. No. Defense in depth says, are you equally spreading the risk across multiple areas? And if 1 or 2 items fail, we're still going to be okay. Good example. If you look at most people's retirement or 401k, at most companies, they have 10 different funds they can choose from. And what does almost everybody do? They do 8 to 12% for each of those funds. Maybe one they like, they do 12, one they don't, a little 8, but they equally disperse it. I know very few people that are going to go in and put all their money in one fund. It's too risky. If that fund fails, you lose everything. And by the way, if you put 91% in one fund and 1% in 9 other funds, even though you're investing in 10 funds, that's not defense in depth. Because if you lose that 191%, you lose everything. Defense in depth is equally spreading the risk. And good CISOs understand that. Good CISOs ask questions to make sure that's being done. So here's the defense in depth. You want to go in and take each security device and cover it up and say, what if it's removed or compromised? If it's removed and compromised, what is my level of security? And then put it back and then cover up the next one. If you have true defense in depth in your organization, you should be able to remove or take away any device and still have effective security. Now, just so we're clear, if you do redundancy, it's both. I had one of my clients where they had 2 firewalls redundant and they only covered up one and said, well, I'm good because I have the other one. No, come on. You know better than that. It's both firewalls are taken out. Because remember, if they're the same vendor with same redundancy, they'd have the same impact. So if you're having redundant firewalls, both of them are taken out. What's the impact? And then put them back. Your IDSs are taken out. Put them back. Your IPS is taken out. Put them back. So that's really what we're focusing on there. We really want to make sure that we have true defense in depth. If any one measure fails, then you're going to be able to detect it and catch it. And then ultimately it comes down to this. What is your level of confidence that if you're compromised, you would be able to detect it in a timely manner? And then here's what good CISOs ask one question. What level of confidence do we have that if we were compromised, we'd be able to catch it in a timely manner? World-class CISOs ask a second question. What proof do we have? Where's the proof that that is true? Prove it. Right? I always ask that when I go and I work with teams and I interview them, they make all these great claims of how secure and protected and locked down they are. And I always push back and say, okay, what's the proof? What's the data? Remember, world-class CISOs live by a motto of they let data drive decisions, not emotions. Let the facts determine what's happening. Now, here's the problem today. Many good security professionals that have then turned into CISOs grew up in the era of traditional incident response. And traditional incident response was based on the premise that you sit back and you wait for an attack. And then when the attack occurs, there's something visible that you respond to. Now, this worked great. If you remember with the I Love You virus, Code Red, NIMDA, they all have visible signs. When you get hit with one of those, you know it. You know it happened because there's something visible. So you sit back, you see the visible sign, you respond, you react, and life's good. Problem, that doesn't scale today because most of today's attacks are stealthy. So you still have a lot of incident response teams that are sitting back and waiting for something visible, waiting for the smoke to come out of the building. And because there's no smoke and because there's no visible signs, they make the false assumption that we haven't been compromised and we haven't been broken into. Reactive-based incident response is not very effective today because you will get a visible sign in 3 or 4 years. All these companies that have been compromised for 2 or 3 years and had hundreds of millions of records compromised, they all finally got a sign. There was finally something visible that they responded to. That's how they caught the attack. The problem is the visible sign that they responded to detect the attack was 2 or 3 years. That's unacceptable. So what good CISOs do is they go in and say, okay, we're going to have our old school reactive incident response. That's not bad. But we're now going to flip it. And we're going to also do proactive incident response, which is sometimes given a fancy name called threat hunting. Right? But all threat hunting is proactive incident response. We're trying to go in and proactively look for the attack, look for the adversary, and then and only then do we have a higher level of confidence of whether we are or are not compromised. So remember, good CISOs don't overtech. They don't just buy tech because they remember technologies are only valuable if you have solutions, and solutions need process and people. If you don't have the process and people, the tech isn't going to help you. They also step back and they do a tech evaluation. That's where we spent most of this episode on, is getting an accurate, up-to-date network diagram and understanding prevention, detection, inbound, and outbound. And we want to have a balance of inbound prevention, outbound detection. We recognize traditional incident response doesn't work, and we complement that with proactively looking within our network for signs of compromise. Good CISOs have visibility and ask lots of questions. If I can be of further service, please visit us at secure-anchor.com or post a question to this video. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see what you'd like me to cover in future episodes. And once again, thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, join me on my mission of making cyberspace a safe place to live, work, and raise a family.